Hello and welcome to another episode of Veterans to Success, the podcast where I get to interview seemingly ordinary people who have extraordinary stories. And today I've got with me no other than Mark Grant Jones. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Joe. I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. And you know the score, you know the drill. We do a reveal on your story as we go along. And I know your story, you know mine pretty much. And I'm really interested to explore your life and what got you to where you are now. So without further ado, if we can jump straight in and tell me a little bit about your life before the military, way back when you were a young lad.
Yeah, so I was born to two parents in the Air Force. So as soon as I was born in the UK, we whisked off to Germany. So I probably spent my early years, don't remember a lot of it, but I spent my early years in Germany and then back to the mainland. And as I say, I don't really remember a lot of it. My father then joined the police force, so he was in the police force, and my mother was a teacher. I do remember something different from the way I raised my children, but I do remember sort of leaving home and wandering around with my gang of friends, just exploring woods and old bomb shelters and things like that. We were talking about this earlier, and sort of I'm not sure there was quite so much health and safety involved in my childhood as there is nowadays. But yeah, I had a good childhood.
And that's interesting because back in the days, health and safety weren't connected by any way, shape, means, or anything with it. They were two separate words. So I get what you mean.
Yeah. So one of the things my parents did do was force me to go to the Air Cadets when I was I think I was 13, and that was really encouraging. I'm a great fan of cadet force experience, and I think what that does is that puts you in a safe environment but exposes you to risk, and I think that's a really good thing in terms of development, isn't it? Because life is challenging, and if you don't experience challenges early on in life, I think you don't necessarily kind of develop those ways of coping and managing challenges when they do come. So flying, shooting, all kinds of things. I mean, it was a great experience as a young person.
At such an early age as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's formative, isn't it? That's where you, especially as a teenager, you're working out your place in life, and so it's a great place to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember similarly, I was in the Army Cadets, and it taught me a lot about discipline, respect, and I suppose without going off on a tangent, but I mean the world could do with a bit of that really at the minute, a bit of discipline and respect.
Yeah, they're good. They're excellent things to learn, aren't they? And things that school doesn't necessarily overtly teach you.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there were a lot of good life lessons. So you joined the Air Cadets. You did some flying, some shooting, some camping of sorts. And what happened next? What was going on then in your life of adventure?
Yeah, so I didn't really know what to do with my life, to be honest. And my mother kind of signed me up for university. So I went off to study geology. I knew that I loved the outdoors. I loved exploring, traveling. So geology seemed to kind of open the world up a little bit. So I went off and did that. Ended up in the North Sea, working on oil exploration for a little while, and then in civil engineering, which is interesting, which then took me to Wales, where I met my wife. And then my wife introduced me to the church. So I wasn't a religious person for the first part of my life, significant part of my life. I was kind of fairly oblivious to these things. And then my wife took me to church, and the long and the short of it was I became a Baptist minister,
Right.
and married my wife, obviously, and we settled in Sevenoaks in Kent.
Now, I'm interested. What was it that, you know, you have all these films, I See the Light and everything. What was it that when you went to church, and I'm not taking the mick, actually, it's genuinely, I'm interested. What was it during that courtship period with your wife when you went to the church? What sort of changed you from being a run-of-the-mill lad who'd been in the RAF, and he was university, geology, North Sea, and then thought, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I was asking questions, and I'm a great advocate for asking questions. Why are we here? What's life about? What does it all mean? There's a lot of conflicting things out there as to trying to answer that. Lots of philosophies and ideas, and none of it made any sense. And I think I went to church, and it was a little bit scary. People were a bit strange. It's kind of a lot of people knew a lot of stuff that I didn't, so you feel a little bit excluded. But basically, the pastor of the church told me to go away and read the New Testament and just explain why Jesus. What's that all about? Why did he? Who is he? Why did he live? Why did he die? What's it mean to me thousands of years later? And I think I kind of sat there and I read it and read it, and it eventually dawned on me that there was a God. The only person that can walk on water, heal the sick, raise the dead, must be God, because you and I can't do that, and that he cares about me because he is involved in the world, and that I must be in trouble with him because sending Jesus to rescue me was, if that was the best way that he could work out to sort my life out, then that must be the right way. So I kind of found myself at a crossroads where I had to make a decision. I had to either go in that direction or reject it. To be fair about it, you couldn't just bimble along and say it's meaningless. It kind of forces you to say, okay, either it has some meaning for my life, or I'm just going to ignore it. And I thought, it's one of those things where I think, again, taking risks, there is a risk, a leap of faith. I love that scene in one of the Indiana Jones films where he has to kind of step out into a chasm, and I think it's a great image. That there is an element of that, but actually having done that, absolutely the right decision. Absolutely the right decision. And then if you're going to do it, I had to kind of do something with it. So then that led me away from geology and science and stuff into the church to try and help people, basically. Yeah.
And interestingly, because you were of a scientific background, how did you square it away with the scientists who look at science and the evolution and the Big Bang theory to the Christian belief of God and seven days and that sort of belief?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things I think when I was a young man, I was wrestling with. You look at the night sky, NASA was sending up astronauts and telescopes and looking into the universe, and you're thinking, what does that all mean for us? Who are we in the midst of all of that? And I think that's where science doesn't conflict, I think, for me with religion. Religion is about those more important questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And science just goes, this is an amazing universe. The world is amazing. I'm amazing. You're amazing. So what do we do with that? And I think for me, materialism, which is the opposite, humanism that says there is no spiritual, it is so wrong because actually we are such incredible people. We are capable of bad, but we're also capable of such good and love and art and just standing on top of a mountain and looking at the world and just being overwhelmed by that. I think, even if you're not Christian, I think I'm a great advocate for people looking at spirituality and saying, looking beyond themselves, because we are amazing people, and capable of that, yeah.
And one of the things I look at when I'm dealing with clients, and I'm sure you're much the same, is looking at what I call the compass of life: relationships, career, money, health and fitness, but spiritualism. And even if you don't believe in the traditional Christian belief, then spiritualism is so much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah. So even there are very few people that believe in absolutely nothing. There's something in us that knows there is instinctively something beyond us, and it's connecting with that and finding meaning and purpose. And you say about relationships, I think part of that is how we relate to one another. There is a responsibility. There is an opportunity. It's a privilege that we can get to know one another and relate to one another. But how do we do that? And what are the parameters and the ethics and all that kind of stuff? It's a big subject, really, isn't it?
And it is, and you know what? You know when the proverbial hits the fan, right?
Yeah.
Even people who say they don't believe, I bet you £1 to a penny, they say a little prayer. Whatever that statement is, it's a prayer for help.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got to be honest, as a military chaplain, I get a lot of people who say to me, I don't believe what you believe, but I'm glad you believe what you believe. And a lot of people say to me, will you pray for me? They don't want to pray themselves, but they want me to pray for them or even bless their vehicle. I'm not sure what that does, but, I certainly bless them. But
Well, I remember when I had my first my first experience with the Grim Reaper when I was 14 on the way down to Lords to help the sick. And then I nearly died in a road traffic incident, which is another story. They held a ceremony and devoted that ceremony with hundreds of people saying a prayer for me because I was only 14, right? So I'm a little boy, nearly killed. So I think that the power of people coming together for the greater good has massive power.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My challenge to people is if you're not sure about God, or you don't know, then talk to him and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I did,
And
if God is real, he'll answer. Yeah.
And you let the cat out the bag a little bit because you did mention, which is why we're having this conversation, of course, because you're still in the military, you're not a veteran yet. So you've been in the army cadets, you've gone off to university doing what the university students do. You've met your wife. She's given you something to think about, taking you to Wales, off. You become a Baptist minister, and then what's your calling then? Because something quite dramatic happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. So September 11th, 2001, the attack on the World Trade Center in New York. I remember walking home in the morning. I can't remember where I'd gone, but I was walking home past a shop that sold televisions. There was a big crowd outside, and it looked like a warehouse on fire or something like that. Got home, turned on the television, and I think I seem to remember spending the next couple of days just glued to the television, trying to work out what has just happened, because it's not the first time there's been a terrorist attack or anything like that, but I just think it was just right in the heart of what seems so normal, and its impact. And I think in some ways it kind of traumatized a lot of people just watching it and thinking about how close we all are to one another in that context. And of course, as a nation, we start then to engage with that and build up to an invasion of Afghanistan and then an invasion of Iraq. And there's a lot of ambiguity around that. People asking questions: is this the right response? Is it a just war? And people started to kind of ask the church questions. So you started to see church leaders in the news, and then you started to see chaplains, because the soldiers were going to go off and do this difficult job, a lot of unknown, but they were still willing to go off and do that. And you got chaplains being interviewed as to what they were going to do in supporting those soldiers, and then that kind of brought that to me as a kind of concept that people actually go with these soldiers, and that the military employ people like me to go with those soldiers and be with them in the worst of situations, and that just kind of got my wife and I thinking. So we kind of started to kind of push the doors and see what this might look like. And the more we pushed, the more the doors opened. And we both felt it was crazy, but it was the right thing for us to do. That actually, I guess in a sense, there was a sense of duty. Here's a bunch of young people going off to serve their country. I mean, whatever that looked like, they were trying to bring peace and stability and, to the people of the Middle East, but also to our own country. And I felt that I needed to be a part of that, and my wife agreed. So we joined. Well, I joined the army and took my family with me.
What year was that when you joined?
So that was 2003 by the time we'd gone through that process.
All right, so that was
And
round about Iraq time then, wasn't it,
that was
really?
the invasion, yeah.
Iraq too. Yeah.
So I did I did my basic training, and we went off to Germany. I left my wife in Germany with four small children and straight out to Iraq. So if you want to know about medals, she's the one that deserves the medals.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Well, how old were your children?
So they were probably around 2 to 6 years old at that point. Yeah,
And
pretty young.
and if we, in case you're listening, right, and you're thinking, oh, dead easy, a padre, or in the military, right? You're not sitting at a desk, are you? You're not just sitting at a desk, looking at papers and then saying a few mass things. You're doing a little bit more than that, aren't you? So if you just explain, what did you get up to when you were in Iraq? What was your role in the wartime role?
Yeah, so I think one of the attractions of military chaplaincy was that I wasn't just going through the routines of church life. I was actually stepping out of the church and joining people where they were. So, we use that kind of image, that term incarnation, where God becomes a human being in Jesus. He leaves the glory of heaven and comes to live with us, which is, quite a challenge. And therefore, we've got to go where people are, wherever they are, whatever the cost. So you end up as a chaplain, in forward operating bases, in platoon houses, in vehicles, on patrol, and you're with people. But what that does is it means I understand a little of what people are going through. I'm separated from my family. I'm facing the risks, the bombs and the
Yeah,
bullets that they're facing. And I mean, for a start, it's fascinating the conversation that happens in the back of a snatched Land Rover traveling through Basra, and you don't know what the next 5 minutes is going to hold, but those conversations are powerful and they're precious. They can be about, how's your wife? Are the washing machines broken down or whatever,
yeah,
or why are we here? Or if I die, will you do this? And it's profound. And
yeah,
I think in some ways, we surround ourselves in civilian life with lots of comforts. And when you're in those experiences, those moments, everything else is stripped away, and there's a authenticity, a kind of realism where it's you and another person, and you can kind of talk heart to heart, really. So for me, it could be the worst place to be, but it's actually the best place.
yeah,
If and sadly, the people do die because you're in those situations, and you've got to look after people, and that's in a sense the worst, because you lose colleagues, you lose friends, you lose young people who have given everything.
yeah,
Um, but actually, it's the biggest privilege to be there, to remind everyone else, to draw people together, to help people find words or rituals that express their loss, to be able to say to the families, this is what they were like,
yeah.
and a sense of pride towards their service. So it was absolutely. So there was a trepidation in joining. You don't really know what military life is like until you join, do you?
No, no.
But if it's
I
right,
think it's not much like the films say it is, really.
not. It's not.
And how did how did you manage, and what gave you, or where did you get your respite from, your charging your buses? Because I get it. I mean, I was a section commander, or a troop sergeant. Now the fact is that you're you're the chaplain. You go back to your bunk, right? You haven't necessarily got the same sort of group surrounding you where you can bounce ideas. So how did you find solace? Where did you get your strength from? Because when the stuff's hitting the fan, right, and people are telling you about the washing machine, or I've just lost my mate, and all that, that's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it's not a glib thing to say my spiritual life is the source of strength, because I think, you know, and again, for other people, that doesn't have to be a religion or religious activity, but, you know, why are we here? What's the meaning of my life? What's the purpose of what I'm doing? You know, if you have a sense of that, then I think that gives you strength.
Mm,
So I knew I was where God wanted me to be. I knew that I had a purpose, and that purpose was a really positive thing. You know, to be honest, I say being a chaplain is the best job in the world because there's not a lot of negativity around it. You know, I'm there helping people, and you know, people are appreciative, and it's a positive thing, even in the darkest of moments. And I think just knowing that is really helpful. So, you know, wherever you are in life, if you get a sense, if you can pause and reflect and think, you know, why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? And you can get some sense of that direction, then you can find strength, I think. And that's it. The other thing is, you know, often people would say to me, you know, who looks after the Padre? And I say, you do, you know, because the soldiers are awesome. You know,
yeah,
they're you wouldn't necessarily trust them all the time, but they are
yeah.
incredible people, you know, and being with them is really, you know, powerful and a great responsibility, but sorry, a great privilege, but it is exhausting. I think that I remember, particularly in Afghanistan, I remember moments where I'm not sure how I got myself out of bed in the morning or you know, just carried on moving. But
Yeah,
I think again, everyone is in that same boat. So community is helpful there because when you're all together, you all stumble forward somehow, don't you?
yeah.
There's a great illustration of this with Field Marshal Slim in Burma in 1943, 44, I think, where you know the Burma campaign was particularly difficult. Logistically, they had very little. They were going through the jungle, which was horrendously difficult. You know, again, it's not like the films, as you say. You know, it is really difficult stuff. It probably takes you a day to go a mile.
Yeah.
And we're facing the Japanese, who were a particularly difficult enemy.
Well, they
Um,
were ruthless.
absolutely, yeah. And Field Marshal Slim says, you know, when everything else has disappeared, when everything else has failed you, it is the spiritual that keeps you going. And again, I don't think he meant necessarily religious. He meant, you know, that sense of something beyond yourself.
Yeah,
Maybe that sense of service to your country, or that service to your mates, or that sense of belief in what you're doing is right. You know, and I think that is, you know, if you lose that, then what you need to do, I think, is to stop and go back and find that.
yeah.
That's the secret.
And thank you for that. It's interesting. I wanna rewind a bit because I think that behind every successful man is a great woman, mostly, or a great partner, spouse, relationship. You mentioned that your wife should have got a medal, at least one medal, which I'm sure they will introduce at one stage in the future. You got four kids back home. They're aged between 2 and 6, and you know, after your first tour, I've often heard children say, "Mum, my dad's changed. What's happened?" And what sort of push me, pull you emotions were you going through when you knew your wife was at home with your 4 children, and then when you got home, what? If you don't mind me asking, how did that dynamic work?
Yeah, not at all. No. So you're absolutely right. These things, these experiences change you as a person, and I think that's been a journey. You know, I'm in a very different place than I was a while ago, and when you come back, there is you've both changed. You know, so my wife has been a single parent with 4 children in a foreign country. She's changed. She's grown. You know, she's
Mm,
been successful. You know, everyone's alive and fed, and she's done well. And I've changed, but we've changed differently and separately. So in a sense, you're constantly kind of renewing your relationship and working out how that works. And it is really challenging. You know, I it worked for me, but I know colleagues, many of for whom it hasn't worked. You know,
mm,
relationships have broken up, and it is one of the costs, I think. Now, there's help out there and there's support. And I think, that is really important, is finding that support, not being proud and not trying to do it yourself, but recognizing, when you go through experiences like that, you do change. And I remember we as chaplains used to deliver kind of training to soldiers as they went out and as they came back to help them think this thing through. But I think, it's one of those things that happens over time. I think sometimes stresses and pressures don't come out immediately. They come out 10 years later. Sometimes things are triggered. So yeah, it's a journey. But my wife's an amazing person, and I've been on a journey of learning, I think, as to how to kind of deal with that.
Thank you. And it's also interesting, I find, when I was in the military, when we spent a lot of time away, the people who were married, the pads, if you like, were having a great relationship because they weren't with the wives or husbands on a daily basis. Then when they come back, and especially when they got out, that's when the wheels started to wobble, because they recognise that the differences, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think you're spot on. I think I think recognizing that is half the battle, half the success, though. To know that these things are going to happen, therefore adapting to that. But being on operations was simple. Someone fed me. Someone else did my laundry. There wasn't much else I just had to focus on the job. My wife had to kind of get the kids to and fro different schools and all that, hospitals and all that kind of stuff. Much more complicated. Operations or even exercise, very simple. So I've got to be honest, I've got a few medals. My wife deserves them all. Yeah.
Well, same as my wife deserves the medals because she runs the house when I've not been there and what have you. So yeah, good. Thank you for that. So what I'd like to look at, I mean, we're going to go, I want to examine a few other things, but what challenges did you face? And I'm not going to pose the question when you transition from the military. What I am going to do, though, is something that you did have to transition from, because now you've been in a few conflicts. And I was transitioning to what you're doing now, which we'll come on to about more of the detail in a second. But how did you find that transition when you came back and with your wife, the children, and sort of getting back into a different sort of life?
Yeah, I think, and I am, to be fair, I am transitioning out of the army. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. And I think, no one likes change, I don't think. And the unknown and all that kind of stuff. I mean, every job I move to, and I kind of tend to move to a different job every 2 years, and it's always into the unknown. No one really prepares you for the next job, and you just get into your comfort zone in 2 years, and then they kind of disrupt that, and that's the military way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so I think I'm a great advocate for the core values. I mean, I'm speaking from an army perspective, but I know the Air Force and the Navy have their values as well. And in the army, one of the values is discipline. And I think, by holding on to that discipline, so, if I'm out of sorts or I'm uncomfortable or, as I say, I've transferred from an operational theatre back home, just go through the routines, brush my teeth, go to bed, get up in the morning, have breakfast, go to work. And eventually you find your feet, and I think that there is an element, even now, I'm sort of looking potentially at sort of leaving the army next year. I was a bit worried that I would be worried. I was worried that I'd be full of fear because, that's natural, isn't it? But I think if you just kind of do the things you normally do and get into routines, then you find comfort in that. And you kind of find you kind of a bit of stability. It's a bit like handrails, isn't it? That's what discipline is. And don't do what you feel like doing. You might feel like running away, you might feel like just, huddling in a corner under a blanket, but no, just go to work, come home, you know, kiss the
Yeah.
kids on the head, just do normal stuff.
And thank you for being so honest and vulnerable in a way, because I mean, you're a roughy toughy soldier, right? And you are a person of rank, right? And you're supposed to have all the answers. And sometimes we just haven't, have we? Sometimes we just don't have the answers.
Yeah, yeah. I think the military is much better at owning up to that.
Mm,
I think one of the things that the military I've seen over the time I've been in the military in terms of, for instance, training. So rather than training people and saying, I want you to do this, go and do it. And you just go and do it, even though you don't know how to do it. Whereas now we're much more into coaching and mentoring and helping people work out solutions for themselves. Military people now, are encouraged to think about what they do and kind of give them the kind of framework. And the other way, I remember when we went out to Iraq and Afghanistan, we went out as big units. A lot of people now deploy in small groups. So when we went out as big units, we'd be in a community together. We'd all be suffering in the same way, and we'd have lessons and we'd have experiences and we say farewell all together. Whereas now, often we're going out in small groups and doing things. And I think, as I transition into out into the civilian life, I'm actually on my own.
yeah.
It's just me,
Yeah.
unit of one, plus my wife and family. And I think what we're very good now in the military is focusing on resilience and particularly internal resilience. What is it that kind of strengthens you, that encourages you? When things are tough, where do you turn? What do you do? And I think we're much better at that than we used to be.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Now, just and one thing I did promise, and I say to all the guys who come on the show, I never want to explore anything that's operationally sensitive, other than I know that have been challenges and things that haven't gone to plan, and maybe that you would consider as a failure, although it's not. It's a lesson. What was your toughest experiences when you were on operations that you had to deal with, and it really hurt, and you had to reach down to without identifying a particular subject? What was the toughest gig for you?
Yeah, I think the tougher things to some extent are actually looking back now and wishing I'd done things differently. So in some particularly challenging circumstances, I look back and I feel if only I'd done more, or if only I'd done this. So living with regret is a thing, and I think that's where I find strength in talking to other people, particularly people who are in similar circumstances. And it's one of the things I think when people leave the military, they leave the context of people who understand what they have gone through and are going through. And you go into the civilian world, and there's not a lot of people who know what you've been through because you've had particular experiences in the military. So I think that's where you've got to work hard to find those groups of people or communities that you can relate to. But I think when I look back, I mean, we can all say we could have done more in circumstances or situations, but actually, when you're doing your best, probably isn't much you could do.
And at that time, whatever decision you made was the best decision that you could have made under the circumstances. And hindsight's a most wonderful tool, isn't it? And,
it is.
And by the way, from me to you, I know what a marvelous job a chaplain does, chaplaincy in the military, because I've had a few interesting conversations with chaplains during my time. Sometimes when I've been really low, and it makes a difference. You make the difference, all the difference. Yeah. Just that pat on the shoulder or kick up the bum, gentle kick up the bum, and say, "Come on, mate, let's move on. What can we do?" And that does it's objective and not judgmental, if that makes sense.
Good. No, that's good.
And interestingly enough, how is it that you have the magical ability to be able to talk with someone and not be judgmental?
Yeah, that is a great question. Again, to be honest with you, I go back to core values and me teaching core values, for instance, respect for others, and then recognizing how valuable that is, not just in the military, but the whole of life.
Yeah,
And then I'm coming away thinking, do I respect people? So I think reflecting,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not that the military is perfect, but we have these things which are actually powerful things we can exercise. So yeah, respecting other people and recognizing we're all on a journey. None of us are perfect.
no,
Yeah.
no,
And I think chaplains know they're not perfect more than other people. We just
yeah.
don't talk about it. Yeah.
Now, uh, so you've come through the ranks, and I know what you've been doing for the last few years, which I think is marvelous, actually. How much can you share of that, what you're doing at the minute, what you've been up to?
Yeah, I think I share pretty much what I'm doing. So I'm now training chaplaincy. I'm in the Defence Academy in Shrivenham, so I'm training chaplains, and that is a great privilege. So I'm kind of taking something of my experiences and trying not to kind of tell war stories and tell them how it is, but kind of draw lessons out of that and help them. I mean, it's fascinating when you get young people joining and you say, look, the future is yours. I've done my bit, and what I've done will be different from what you're doing. But
Yeah,
you can draw certain lessons and encourage them, and I think being in the military is a great thing. I'm very privileged to be engaging with training Ukrainian chaplains,
yeah,
um,
wow.
and that I think if you were looking for a just war, I think you can see one in Ukraine. It's a war of self-defense,
Mm.
and these are people they've got they're great people, the Ukrainian people, great sense of humor, great passion, enthusiasm, and to be able to support them in some way is just a huge privilege. Yeah.
And they're stalwarts of great value, aren't they? And about teamwork and coming together and watching each other's back.
And actually, they've been really effective. They are very small as a nation, or in terms of people,
Yeah,
geographically
yeah.
big, but in terms of people, very few of them. But they have been very effective, in terms of their ability to defend their country. Yeah.
Unbelievably so. And and what's the secret of you probably won't. I'll have to address this differently because I was going to ask you what's the secret of your success, and more of a what do you think the secret of collectively of success is? Then, if you don't admit to you being successful, what do you think collectively a great secret of success is from your point of view?
Yeah. So for me, it's my relationship with God. That sense that I am working with someone, that I'm working for someone, that they care about me and are with me and guide me. So I love that psalm in the Old Testament where it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil
Yeah,
because God is with me.
yeah,
That gives me great strength. And I know gives great strength to soldiers. Even whatever they believe, it is interesting. But I think success, there are lots of measures of success, aren't there? And it can if you Google it or go on Amazon, you can get lots of books that tell you the secret of success.
yeah.
I think it is that sense of why are you here? What are you doing and where are you going?
Mm.
And for me, religion gives me that structure. It gives me a sense of accountability to someone else, and I think that's important for us. That I'm not a free agent. That I'm responsible. I'm responsible to you. I'm responsible to the community. I'm responsible to other people, even to people I don't know or not related to. I mean, one of the things that fascinates me is when soldiers go to foreign countries and do an incredible job and put their life on the line for people who are not part of their own tribe
Yeah.
or country that isn't their own. That is the best of us, you know.
Yeah.
So you only do that, I think, when you have a higher purpose. And you know, you can use the term spiritual or whatever that is, but I think it's that sense of serving something beyond yourself. And that's the question for all of us. If you're just serving yourself, then there is something not quite right. That's not the way we're
Yeah.
made. Or
Yeah.
serving something bigger than yourself,
Yeah.
whether that's a charity or whether that's a community or a cause, you know, I think that gives you great strength.
I'm paraphrasing. No greater love has one than someone who's prepared to lay down their life, metaphorically or real,
Absolutely,
for the good of
absolutely.
someone else. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I know that I spent, because I'm becoming older in years, relatives of mine spend a lot more time in hospital now. And one of the visits, when I go to Wiston Hospital, for instance, they have a sanctuary in there, right, which is a chapel, but it's for all faith, for
yeah.
Buddhists, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Catholics, Church of England, and you're just able to go in there and just spend some time. They've got prayer mats and everything, because we're all in it together at the end of the day.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think, you know, even just stepping out into the onto the grass or into
Yeah,
a woods or just the night sky and just looking up and just having I think part of the problem in modern society is we're busy and we fill our time. We don't like silence, we don't like space. You know, our mobile phones are constantly buzzing and stimulating us. And I think physically that's not good for us because that's stimulating us in a way that's not natural. And I think it's a real battle to get back, you know, whether you call it meditation or mindfulness or just kind of taking a moment or whatever it is, you know, I think we need to kind of do that. We need a bit of
yeah,
space as human
yeah.
beings to reflect. Yeah.
And I'm sure we could speak on social media and the effects of it for absolutely hours. The only thing, so I won't go there during this chat. What I will say is, that term for it, a smart device. They're not smart at all, in my opinion, because they just take up far too much of your time. I mean, I like it because people can listen and watch Veterans to Success. Apart from that, though, no, switch it off.
So that's the thing, isn't it? These things are not bad things, you know, and there's lots of advantages
Yeah,
now, but actually it's what you do with that. And I think you've got to be intentional. And I think that's probably another key to success. That you've got to be intentional. If you just drift, everything else will control you.
mm,
But if you know where you're going, you have intention and you aim for something, then you're in control. But if you're not taking control of your life, then there is so much around you that will just control you. And I don't know, when you get to the end of your life and you think, you know, all I've done is spent my time on Twitter
yeah.
or Instagram or whatever, I don't think you're going to feel happy about that.
So I suppose the secret to that is moderation and regulation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you're back to discipline, you
Yeah, yeah,
know,
of course.
a little bit, you know, do a bit here, a bit there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then you control it rather than it control you, of course. So I know you haven't, well, I'm not sure whether you've ventured into business networking yet, and Transformer Business Network is something that I run to help veterans communicate and network with business owners. What you are a master of, though, is social networking. So what do you think how important do you think good social networking is in having a balanced life?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think, yeah, in terms of looking at the next step for my life, I think connecting with people, finding out, you know, what the world's like outside the military, what the challenges and opportunities are. Well, that's through connecting with people, isn't it?
Mm,
Uh,
yeah,
and I think that's again a helpful thing, but that's an example of taking control, isn't it? Not just drifting and expecting someone to do something for you. Now, you know, people say that's what the military does. The military looks after you, feeds you, it does everything for you. I'm not sure it does. I think you still have to take control of your own life in the military, but you know, you're entering into the civilian world. You've got to kind of begin to engage. you know, for instance, for me, I'm looking at particular maybe charity sector or maybe the church
Yeah.
or something overseas. And so I start to engage with people that are doing those kind of things and talk to them and so on. I think also there's an element of encouragement. We talked about finding people who've experienced the things you've experienced, you know.
Yeah.
So you leave the military, you're out in the world, you know, you tend to draw towards people who've had similar experiences. That's not a bad thing because people understand you.
Mm.
But I think it's important to find people that encourage you, you know, people that will give you wisdom. Because, you know, when I'm walking around and everything's in my head, I'm not necessarily kind of getting it right. You know, I mean, my wife tells me that all the time. You know,
Yeah,
but it's
me,
good.
yeah, mine too. Yeah, go on.
But that's similar to coaching and mentoring and things like that, isn't it? You
Yeah.
got someone who's outside of your circumstances that can give you a bit of guidance and wisdom or a
Mm.
bit of oversight or a bit of kind of different perspective. And I think that's where community is really important, you know, whether that's kind of a social community, football team, church, or you know, coaching and mentoring. But yeah, connecting with people, the great evidence. I mean, you know, part of what I do is sort of trying to help people avoid going down a dark path into dark places. And when we focus on ourselves, that tends to lead us to dark places.
Mm.
You know, if we focus outside of ourselves, and particularly if we engage with other people, that gives us strength and resilience. You know, physically, you can measure. You know, psychologists and doctors have measured people in community and people in churches, for instance, being stronger, more resilient than
Yeah.
people who live on their own. You know, it's fascinating.
And I always say to my sons, in fact, I say it to most people, if you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours.
Yeah, yeah,
And I say it, and then I jokingly say, from a selfish point of view, smiling uses less muscles and it's better for you anyway. So you see, because we just smile, don't we? Because it's great. It's so
yeah,
fabulous to smile. You know, you'll have helped probably probably a massive number of guys who've been getting out of the military, maybe going through some relationship issues, either with the loved ones or relationship issues with themselves, because self-relationship is the biggest one. And when they've been getting out of the military, what sort of conversations have you had with them? And are you having with yourself now about how transferable the skills are, the absolutely massive skills you learned in the military to Civvy Street?
yeah. It's really interesting because again, you end up in a culture with your own language and your own ways, and you know what the military is like with acronyms and things like that. You know, we kind of we talk in code.
Yeah.
And then you come out, you know, you talk to your civilian friends, and they haven't got a clue what you're talking about. You know,
No.
and they then go back to Saving Private Ryan or something and thinking that's what you did, or something. You know, it's just the wrong images. And I think language is really important. I think being able to translate what we do in the military to civilian terms takes a bit of work, but
Mm.
actually everybody in the military has had experience in all kinds of valuable skills. You
Mm.
might not know it, you might not think it, but particularly as I started to kind of look outwards and preparing a CV, for instance, writing down what I've done, and there were a few moments when I went, I've actually done this or I've done
Yeah.
that. You know, I might have a piece of paper that says it, and piece of papers can be helpful, but I've actually had some experience, and I could say I've done this with that team or I've done that, and I've actually done stuff that actually I didn't really think of it in those terms.
No.
But you know, I have kind of done maybe a bit of teaching or a bit of coaching or a bit of mentoring, and you kind of start to write that down. And I think writing stuff down, you know, particularly when you're preparing a CV, is really helpful because you begin to realize you have some skills.
And it can be cathartic as well, because it does help you recognize, wow,
Yeah.
look at what I know.
And I think once you start, yeah, you will. You'll realize actually you've done quite a lot.
And interestingly enough, when people are asking to connect with me on LinkedIn, I look at the CV, and or the profile, and if I see they're ex-military, I find it I find it slightly amusing now because I'm looking to see whether I can guess who they serve with, because what they're describing are all the civilian skills that they learned. And I'm thinking, right, whether you're in the logistics, infantry, artillery, engineers, REME, or military police or RAF. Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I mean, I've talked to a lot of infanteers. Now, you think an infantry soldier is good at using a rifle and delivering lethal force, but actually they're also generally good at team working, even logistics, communications, kind of stress management, fitness. There's a whole raft. You start to write down that stuff, and they may not have all the pieces of paper, but they have the experience.
And a biggie for an employer are two biggies actually: punctuality and discipline. And loyalty as well.
So when I was doing a bit of resettlement training, what was interesting was how many times people were saying employers will teach you the things they want from you if you've got the raw material.
The hard skills.
And as you say, if you've got that punctuality, that loyalty, that discipline, all that kind of stuff, that's what they want, and for military people, and I would say for veterans who are kind of still looking and trying to find their place, remember what you have, write it down, get it in the right language,
because that's cultural behavior, those things. And as you say, hard skills like engineering or how to wire a plug, simplistically, that can be taught. The other stuff takes far longer to actually embed. So what's the one tip you would give to someone, either in your role as a chaplain or in your role as someone's getting out of the military, or just as a good bloke, right? What's the top tip you give to a guy who's leaving the military, or a veteran who's already left the military, maybe really succeeding or maybe having a tough time?
I think I'm going to say a couple of things. I think discipline, first of all, do the things that are normal, make sure you look after your sleep, your health, your eating, your relationships. You're going through change and transition, and everything is up in the air a little bit and disconnected, so keep the disciplines that keep you fit and healthy and mentally, emotionally, and so on, because you're going through transitions, and that's always challenging. And the second thing is people. Find people that can help you or advise you or support you or encourage you, and if people aren't able to do that, find other people, because there's lots of people out there, and everyone's helpful, everyone's got experiences, and maybe for the moment you just need to find the right people to help you.
Which always reminds me of what I say constantly: beware dream stealers, because there are a few out there. I think there's, like you say, I think there's far more good people out there than there are bad. The bad just happen to get in the news more or move around. The good people, like nobody, we haven't got a load of reporters waiting outside our doors waiting to interview us because we are just having a great podcast, have we?
No, but you are right. I think I mean, there are all kinds of phrases you can use, but you can have people that can suck the morale out of a room quite easily. And we're, as people, we tend to be loyal to people and stick with people, but actually you've got to be quite tactical and strategic about that. And if you're in need, find the right people, and park. Don't be rude or nasty, but park the people that are not helpful to you. Because as you say, sometimes people need something from us, and we haven't got something to give, and actually we need to receive at that time. Different seasons.
Definitely. And what does the future hold for you? Because you've got interesting times ahead, and I know you've been training chaplains from Ukraine, in fact, from all around the world, from war-torn parts of the world, and now you're moving to the next chapter of your life with your family. And what's it looking like at the minute? What's the future hold for you?
That's a great question. So there's the big unknown, don't know. I have, again, one of the things I kind of came to realize a little while back that was really helpful was to stick with what I'm good at. I've gone through a lot of training and experience, and that's got to be, I've got to use that. Now's not the time to change careers completely and become, I don't know, a blacksmith or anything like that. Just stick with what I know. And I think, I love teaching and leadership development and all that kind of stuff. But I also have a real heart for veterans. I think, when you step out of the military, you're stepping out of a family. It doesn't always work for people, and some people have some bad stories, but you're still coming out of an environment where you were looked after, you had purpose and meaning, and you didn't have to kind of do too much thinking in some ways, and then you're into the big wide world. And I think helping people like what you're doing, I think that is, is a powerful work. And I think, if God can lead me in some way, whether that's through the church or through charity work, then I feel that's probably a good use of my skills. But who knows? But I know God's got a plan.
That's great. Yeah, there's always a plan. And
There's always a plan.
so how can people get in touch if they'd like to get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, which is actually working out as an interesting place,
Yeah.
In terms of social media,
it is quite a good place, isn't it? Because that's how we met.
Yeah. And I think it is a great way of networking. And even if you're kind of networking with people in industries or situations you're not going to kind of follow, it's interesting to look at how people are kind of working in this world and doing things. And I think for me, I'm a great fan of lifelong learning. So I want to learn from people and keep growing. So LinkedIn is a helpful tool for me in that regard. Yeah.
Well,
otherwise I'm at the Defence Academy. So
yes.
there aren't that many of us. Yeah.
Which is a big place. So
It is.
listen, I do wish you the very best. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being there, and your colleagues who've been there for me in the past as well, for the great work you do. And I know that we all get imposter syndrome from time to time, or the we could have done better. Why didn't we do that? What you do is amazing. Also, pass my best wishes to all the guys you're training. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. And remember, if you want to get in touch, you can find us on LinkedIn and joeteams.com, joeteams.com is where you can find out loads of resources. The podcasts are recorded there. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day. Thank you.